With ABC to Socialism, 1974, 7 years old. That year, Alexander Solzhenitsyn was arrested and exiled from the USSR for publishing the Gulag Archipelago. Otherwise, there were no changes. The fight against ideological sabotage continued. Books, films, and music were strictly censored. People lived with limited choice, but with a strong sense of community. Letters, trips to the dacha, queues for sausage, all were part of everyday life. Families discussed not politics, but how to get furniture, where to buy boots, and when they would get an apartment. For me, school began that year. Studying came easily to me. I adored biology. This fascination had a prehistoric origin. My mother, who worked as a school nurse, often took me to work and brought me exhibits from biology class. These included stuffed birds, preserved embryos, anatomical models with exposed entrails, and other naturalistic wonders. My love for this subject continued into high school. I once participated in a biology Olympiad and took first place in my district and fifth in the region. While excelling in biology, I also excelled in chemistry and even set up a whole chemistry lab at home, again with my mother's help, as she borrowed flasks, test tubes, and spirit lamps from chemistry class. However, the lab soon had to be shut down because I nearly set the apartment on fire, creating a flame from aluminum and iodine. I didn't like geography, so I doubted I'd be able to find Lake Titicaca or Mount Kilimanjaro on a map, which my father could easily find. But I had to sit through geography class somehow, which meant I had to come up with something more interesting to do than color in a map, especially if I'd forgotten it at home. So one day, my best friend Ira and I decided to give free rein to our imaginations, which this time turned out to be postal forwarding. There were also cemetery memorial, school bag throwing, and many others. Our work ethic would have been the envy of the Skillful Hands Club. In a very short time, 2 pairs of inventive upper limbs, guided by equally inventive brains, created a surprise for each student in a mini envelope. As a budding poet, I naturally used versification. My couplets began with the words, "We're sending you," and ended with the phrase, "There's no money for anything else." Thus, someone received candy, "We're sending you candy," "There's no money for anything else," someone a wall newspaper, and someone even a carriage. Each poem was accompanied by a miniature model of the surprises. Of course, we couldn't recreate the carriage out of paper, so we included a receipt for its payment in the envelope. Another time, again with Ira, we built a paper cemetery on the windowsill, burying the most deserving members of our class. There were trees, benches, and monuments with inscriptions. Unfortunately, our homeroom teacher, Anna, didn't appreciate our efforts and ordered this mess to be removed immediately. One day, I broke a classroom window, throwing my school bag to a classmate who ducked instead of catching it. The bag whizzed over my short-cropped head, smashed through the window, and landed in the school garden bed. Oh, how I got into trouble! Of course, an excellent student, almost a medalist, and such unconscionable behavior. My father had to hire a glazier, but the incident was soon hushed up. My medal was of interest not only to my parents but also to the school, for which it was a matter of prestige. Urok Truda, translated as labor class, was a mandatory subject in Soviet schools, starting around age 10. Boys learned woodworking, metalwork, and basic industrial skills. Girls were taught sewing, cooking, and household crafts. These classes were intended to instill discipline, prepare children for practical work, and reinforce traditional gender roles. For many, they were a mix of boredom, pride, and quiet rebellion. I hated this class. I won't hide the fact that I enjoyed working mentally rather than physically, and even though I didn't have to unload train cars in these classes, I still preferred chemistry and biology. I refused to sew a nightgown, claiming I slept in my pajamas, and I also had long arguments with the teacher about how a modern woman could easily live without cutting and sewing. While I was arguing, my mother was still sewing the nightgown for me. I needed a good grade for my medal. I also struggled in physical education class, where I couldn't do 10 push-ups due to my natural inability. However, again, because of the medal, I assured the PE teacher that I would do push-ups all summer and would be well fit for the following school year. In 10th grade, I became a trendsetter. I started wearing socks with sandals, a lanyard around my neck, and earrings of varying lengths. With the latter, everyone would ask, "Did you lose your earring?" until they realized it was a new style. But let's get back to my first grade. I remember well how, a few days before school started, parents and children were invited into the classrooms to get acquainted. We were made to write numbers. Mine were inside out. I was in Class B. There were 4 classes in total. I was assigned to the best teacher, picked by my parents. My favorite things in first grade were the New Year's masquerade ball, where I played a fox, and the ABC Book Festival, where, as the tallest girl in class, I was the native speech book. I was dressed in a huge book-shaped box, and the shortest boy in the class was given a similar costume. He was the ABC book. Then there was an amateur performance concert, and at my suggestion, we sang "My Address is Not a House or a Street, My Address is the Soviet Union." In the first grade, I had 2 friends, Luda and Vova. Luda was my first friend. We met in first grade. My father preferred to befriend the village intelligentsia, including doctors and teachers. Luda's parents were math teachers. Her family came to visit us shortly before the start of the first school year, and we immediately started jumping from the closet to the new sofa. That's how our friendship began. Vova's parents were friends with Luda's parents, and that's how our families began communicating. The 3 of us walked to and from school together, did our homework, and spent our free time together. Vova was short, and Luda was considered the most beautiful girl in our class. However, Vova fell in love with me. I discovered it by accident in 3rd grade. Vova's parents decided to move from the village to a neighboring town. A few months before leaving, Vova did something truly adult. He asked the teacher's permission to sit with me at my desk for the rest of the time. This was in 3rd grade. Usually, girls sat with girls, and boys with boys. I felt awkward when Vova moved into my desk. After he left, Vova came to our village a few more times and spent the night in our apartment. He was a very independent boy. Luda remained beautiful forever. She died tragically in an accident in the prime of her youth and beauty. I don't know what happened to Vova, although I unexpectedly ran into him online early in my emigration. We struck up an interesting correspondence, which gradually faded, and we lost touch once again. However, in first grade, I had a crush on another boy. His name was Dioma. He was a charming, mischievous character, and even then, I was drawn to mischievous people. Unexpectedly, first grade came to an end. To celebrate, our teacher took us on a hike to a forest belt near the school. And although there were all sorts of nasty rumors about this forest belt, that didn't stop the young teacher. In our backpacks were tomatoes, sausages, and hard-boiled eggs. My nose was covered in a multitude of freckles. Somehow, unexpectedly, we started dividing into groups. Luda and I found ourselves in a group of boys. Suddenly, Dioma approached me. "I need to tell you something," he said mysteriously, and we disappeared behind the trunk of a thick oak tree, on which "Lena and Talik were here" was carved with a knife. "You know," said Dioma without preamble, "I fell in love with you, and Kipa fell in love with Luda." Kipa was Dima's best friend, so it was no wonder they decided to fall in love at the same time, and they even chose 2 friends for this noble goal. I like the word "fell in love." I've heard it on TV several times already. However, Dioma and Kipa's feelings were fleeting. They ended after Kipa invited Luda and me to his birthday party. At the last minute, Luda didn't go, and I had to walk alone through the entire village with the silly, huge box of space construction sets my parents had chosen as a present. I felt incredibly uncomfortable. And when the boys didn't show up to meet me at the appointed time, I was ready to sink into the ground. I had to trudge home and later assemble the construction set myself. Once, when I was already a student, I met Dioma at a village dance. We kissed, but it was unremarkable. In 1974, I not only started first grade, but I was also enrolled in a music school for piano lessons. My parents decided that I needed to study music. The instrument was chosen for its prestige. Playing the piano was more prestigious than, say, the accordion or button accordion. I didn't even hint at the desire to play the guitar, because at that age, and even much later, I believed that I should listen to my parents. Besides music, I was also sent to a sports school. I wasn't much of an athlete, but I still had the desire to go to the gym. Although I was unsteady on the balance beam and couldn't do a pull-up on the parallel bars, I jumped over the goat well. My long legs allowed me to do this easily. However, my trips to the gym were short-lived, as I couldn't keep up with 3 schools, and it was decided to give up athletics. For a while, I couldn't pass by the sports school without crying, as it was right on the way to the music school. Dad bought a black piano. It was barely hauled up to the 2nd floor with the help of neighbors. Not everyone could afford an instrument back then. I loved the swivel chair, which I could use to make myself dizzy. I didn't enjoy music school. The solfeggio teachers didn't like me. My long legs didn't fit under the piano. Even though I loved singing, my parents excused me from choir lessons, citing frequent sore throats. Even though I played the piano poorly, my photo was on the honor roll, I guess out of respect for my father. Whenever I passed by the roll, I tried to get past it as quickly as possible. Firstly, because I didn't like being on the roll undeservedly. Secondly, there was something wrong with my eye in the photo. It looked like it had been cut out of another photo and glued on. As I already said, I loved to sing. So, in 5th grade, I learned 3 chords and demanded a guitar from my parents. Since I didn't have a teacher, I never learned to play the instrument and continued to strum those same 3 chords until now.
Как там все очень скверно, ясно и так без слов. Ты заболела верно, кто же теперь здоров?
Even though my solfeggio teacher disliked me, that didn't stop her from inviting me to sing in her quartet, as I had a good ear and wasn't out of tune. And in 8th grade, I unexpectedly found myself in a band as one of the soloists. I managed to sing at 2 concerts before the band, for some reason, broke up. One time, we performed at the Palace of Culture. The audience in the hall was from the village. The acoustics were so bad that I couldn't hear what the second soloist was singing or what the musicians were playing. My friend Lida recorded our performance on tape. The second time, we sang on the street during the Miners' Day celebration. I felt like I was part of a special, different life. I enjoyed performing, although I was always very nervous.